The morning he left felt quieter than it should have. Not peaceful, just hollow, like the house itself knew something had ended. Ayesha stood in the kitchen, her fingers wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She hadn't slept. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same moment replaying again and again, his face, calm and distant, as if he was discussing something as ordinary as the weather. "I think this is for the best," he had said. For the best. After 8 years of marriage, those were the words he chose. No anger. No regret. Just a clean, calculated exit. He had already packed his bags. Already made his plans. Already moved on, at least in his mind. And her? She was still standing there, trying to understand how a life could fall apart so quietly. The papers were signed within days. He didn't argue about the house, because technically it wasn't his. But he didn't fight for anything else either. No memories, no explanations, no closure. Just silence. And then he was gone. The first week after the divorce was the hardest. Not because she missed him, at least, not in the way people expect. It wasn't love she felt. It was confusion. A deep, aching confusion that settled into her chest and refused to leave. How do you spend years building something with someone, only for them to walk away like it meant nothing? She replayed everything. Every conversation. Every small disagreement. Every moment she thought was normal. Was there a sign she missed? Or had he already decided long before he said the words? The house felt too big now. Every room echoed with memories she didn't know how to carry anymore. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was loud. Too loud. On the 10th day, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden realization. No life-changing speech. Just a small, quiet decision. She got out of bed. That was it. She made breakfast. She opened the windows. She let the sunlight in, even though it hurt her eyes. It felt strange, almost wrong, to move forward when everything inside her still felt broken. But she did it anyway. Ayesha had always been the kind of person who gave more than she took. In her marriage, she had adjusted, compromised, stayed quiet when she should have spoken. She told herself it was love. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was fear. Fear of losing something she had worked so hard to build. Now that it was gone, she realized something unsettling. She had built her entire life around someone who had already decided to leave. 2 weeks later, she found herself sitting across from her lawyer again. There were still a few documents left to finalize. Technical things. Legal language she didn't fully understand. He slid a file across the table. "There's one thing you should be aware of," he said. She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "This property, the house, it's not just in your name." Her heart skipped. "What?" "There's a clause," he continued, opening the file. "It was added years ago. It states that in the event of a separation, full ownership transfers entirely to you. No contest." She frowned. "But that's already the case, isn't it?" He shook his head. "Not exactly. There's more attached to it." He turned the page. And that's when everything changed. The house wasn't just a house. It was part of something much bigger. Ayesha stared at the documents, her mind struggling to keep up with the words in front of her. Commercial assets. Rental agreements. Investment properties. Her name was listed across multiple pages. Dozens of them. "This can't be right," she whispered. Her lawyer leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "It is. These properties were acquired under your name over the years. Legally, they belong to you. But I didn't buy these." "No," he said quietly, "but someone did. And they chose to register everything under your ownership." Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. Each one told the same story. Assets. Income. Control. All of it. Hers. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of heartbreak this time, but because of something else entirely. Questions. So many questions. Why would he do that? Why put everything under her name? and then walk away without saying a word. It didn't make sense. Unless he had forgotten. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, piece by piece, until it became impossible to ignore. He hadn't just left. He had walked away from everything. Everything he had built. Everything he thought he owned. Everything that was never really his. Ayesha spent the next few days going through every document, every file, every detail she could find. The deeper she looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. Over the years, whenever they had made an investment, he had insisted on putting it in her name. At the time, it felt like trust, like love. Just in case, he used to say. She never questioned it. Why would she? They were a team. Or at least, she thought they were. Now, sitting alone in the same house that once felt like a shared dream, she finally understood something that had been hidden in plain sight. He never imagined a future where she wasn't there. That's why he never protected himself. He didn't think he needed to. The irony was almost unbearable. The man who walked away so confidently had left behind everything that gave him that confidence. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, Ayesha began to change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. She learned. She asked questions. She made decisions. For the first time in years, she wasn't adjusting her life around someone else's choices. She was building something of her own. Managing the properties wasn't easy at first. There were tenants to deal with, contracts to review, repairs to handle. Mistakes were made. Lessons were learned. But with each challenge, something inside her grew stronger, more certain, more grounded. One afternoon, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the city, she realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you'll be okay, even when things aren't. She didn't hate him. Not anymore. Anger required energy she no longer wanted to give. What she felt instead was something quieter. Understanding. He had made his choice. And in doing so, he had unknowingly given her something far more valuable than anything he took away. Freedom. Months later, their paths crossed again. It wasn't planned. Just one of those moments life throws at you when you least expect it. He looked different, less certain, less composed. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. Doubt. They exchanged a few words. Polite, distant, like strangers who once knew each other too well. He hesitated before leaving, as if there was something he wanted to say. Something important. But the words never came. As he walked away, Ayesha felt no urge to stop him. No need for closure. No unanswered questions. Because the truth was, she already had her answers. He had forgotten one powerful detail. Not about the properties. Not about the legal documents. Not even about the money. He had forgotten her. The woman who stood beside him while everything was being built. The woman who learned, adapted, and grew, quietly, patiently, consistently. The woman who didn't break, even when everything else did. And now? She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, on her own terms, in her own way, without needing anyone to stay. Because sometimes, the greatest turning point in life doesn't come from what you gain. It comes from what someone else chooses to walk away from. And in that space they leave behind, you finally find yourself.